AdventureSmart people know that sometimes, even when you've done everything right, something can still go wrong.
So, you want to be AdventureSmart. Good.
But what is being AdventureSmart?
Being AdventureSmart is really all about taking responsibility for your own safety and following the 3 T's.
Got it. What are the 3 T's?
What are the 3 T's? The 3 T's are the trifecta of outdoor safety: trip planning, training, and taking the essentials. The 3 T's can vary from person to person, activity to activity, and season to season. But here are some important ways to ensure you are prepared and safe on your next adventure. Trip planning. We could go on forever about this one. Trip planning is an essential step and one of the easiest ways we can stay safe on our adventures. This is something that should be done every time we head into the outdoors, whether for a few hours or multiple days. Trip planning can be broken down into 4 simple steps. Planning your travel route and navigation is about picking a trail or route based on its difficulty that's relative to your experience, ability, and the amount of time you have. Know your limits. Not all trails are created equal, so know the terrain and conditions. A 10-kilometer hike scrambling straight up a steep mountain is a lot different than a 10-kilometer stroll around a lake. Before you go anywhere, check the weather and keep checking it as things can change fast. This includes wind, precipitation, temperature, and sunset times. Finally, make sure you leave a comprehensive trip plan with a trusted contact. Keep in mind, this may not be your mom or dad or best buddy. Choose someone you can count on if you were to get into trouble. A comprehensive trip plan might be as simple as sending your trusted contact a text or email with key information about your activity, or using the AdventureSmart app, which allows you to enter a detailed trip plan. Training doesn't mean being an elite athlete or being queen of the mountain on Strava. Training is a continuous process of outdoor recreation. It's about developing the necessary skills and abilities to be safe. This might include working your way up to that big summit hike, taking a few courses to expand your wilderness and backcountry knowledge, navigation and route finding courses, or even learning more advanced skills like rescue and emergency training. You have planned and trained. Now make sure you take the essentials. Taking the essentials means packing everything you potentially need to stay warm, safe, and dry if an emergency unexpectedly arises. What if you rolled your ankle or got hurt? What if you got lost and had to spend the night outdoors? Take the time and be prepared to look after yourself. So that's it. Those are the 3 T's.
That's it.
But no matter how hard you train, how well you trip plan, and how much essential gear you bring, you may still find yourself in an emergency. And that's okay. The wilderness can be unpredictable. If you find yourself in an emergency, it's important to stop, think, observe, and plan. Use that essential gear you brought to stay warm, dry, and safe, and contact 911 on your emergency communication device. Remember, search and rescue in BC is free for everyone. Remember, safety is an outcome of good trip planning, training, and taking the essentials. It's your responsibility. So let's all do our part and be AdventureSmart.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Scott Montague from Coquitlam Search and Rescue, and I'll be running the tech support from the comfort of the indoors this week on Zoom and Facebook Live tonight. Your cameras and mics are off for the session, but we still want to hear from you. If you have a question, drop it in the Q&A box, and we can keep track of it, and then we'll either answer it in the Q&A portion live, or we'll answer it online. If you don't want the audience to see your name, make sure to mark your question as anonymous. I'll also be keeping an eye on the chat box and posting links there as we go. Don't forget, you can use the reactions button throughout the webinar. Let's give it a shot now. For each time that you have had something truly frightening happen to you in the backcountry over your entire life. Give me one shocked face from the reaction. So if you've had five, then give me five shocked faces. Wow, look at them go. Woo. I probably have had my fair share too, five or six. Um, I wanted to let you know that if you're still with us on Zoom at the end, you'll have a chance to win one of the giveaways from our supporters, Bright Source and Rico, and everyone joining us live on Zoom will get a freebie in their email tomorrow. To get us started, though, I'd like to welcome the award-winning Executive Director of AdventureSmart in BC, and a pretty nifty person to boot, Sandra Riches.
Thank you, Scott. Welcome, everyone. We're so excited to be now in gear right into our winter series. We've kicked it off, we're ready to roll, and we've got this happening every other week approximately until middle of March. So if tonight works for you and you want to join us, there's many opportunities to spend some time with Scott and I as we go through the winter. We look forward to queuing these up, having you join us, having these conversations and engaging with our audience as much as we can. We do a lot of that on social. Maybe we've done that with you. Thanks for asking us questions and tuning in there. But then taking the time to sit with us and listen this evening. Our guests bring a wealth of information to subject matters, and they're all experts in those fields. Tonight's guests are no different. Before I introduce them, I'd just like to give you a little bit of a background about who we are and what we do, and then we will jump right into the event. The BC Search and Rescue Association is the creator of the AdventureSmart program here in British Columbia. Based on our provincial success in the first few years, AdventureSmart did go national, so it is offered and available from coast to coast to coast in every province and territory. In British Columbia, we're in a little bit of a different gear. We are supported through BC SARA, and that comes through emergency management and climate readiness, thankfully. So we're grateful for that support. That allows us to work on special projects like our trail-specific safety videos, these webinars, the new Adventure Hub that was just launched. And it's all here to support enthusiasts. It's also here to be considerate and helpful and support our search and rescue volunteers. We have 78 search and rescue groups in BC. 3,400 members are on those 78 groups. Scott's one of those 3,400 volunteers, unpaid professionals, search and rescue members. And they respond to, currently our data indicates 1,500 search and rescue calls a year, just in BC. We're a very busy province. The top 3 reasons for search and rescue currently, based on data, everything we do is based on data. Everything we do with our outdoor education is based on data. It springboards off of that information, those stats, so we can direct and see who we need to talk to, when we need to talk to them, what we need to talk to them about, and how we can help and support you. So the top 3 reasons for search and rescue or injury is number 1, twisted ankles, right up there. Proper footwear is always a helpful tip there for you to look into. Getting lost and disoriented is the second most common reason for search and rescue. So if you understand and can navigate and route find effectively, maybe take a map and compass course, you'll be on the right path, no pun intended, or maybe it was intended. And the third one is exceeding abilities. That comes down to decision making, group dynamics, and how we decide to go further, push ourselves more, or use sound judgment and change our direction and mode and maybe turn around or not even go. I'd like to introduce our guest this evening. Mountain Muskox is a mentorship program that provides safe, supportive, professional, and peer-facilitated group circles for anyone who's experienced loss or trauma in the mountains. We have 2 very special guests with us this evening. Adam Campbell is a professional mountain athlete based in Squamish, British Columbia. He is a circle member, a peer mentor, and sits on the board of directors for Mountain Muskox. His co-presenter this evening is Sarah Steele Johnson. She practices nature-based counseling in Squamish territory, and Sarah believes that healing and wellness happen within the context of connection. That connections with oneself, each other, and the land. These connections have been central to navigating her fluctuating relationship with the mountains, peppered with accidents and fear. I'd like to welcome both Adam and Sarah to our stage, thank them for their time this evening, and I look forward to your presentations. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm just going to get set up here with sharing the presentation. So myself and Adam are very grateful for the opportunity to be a part of the BC AdventureSmart series this winter. And as mentioned by Sandra, we will be covering the topic of trauma in the mountains. Definitely not a light topic, but something that is really important to talk about and be aware of. And as Sandra mentioned, my name's Sarah Still Johnston. I'm a registered clinical counselor, and I specialize in nature-based therapy, therapeutic climbing, and I'm really honored to be a facilitator of the Mountain Muskox mentorship program. And Adam can give himself a little intro here, and then we'll keep rolling.
Yeah, so thanks for giving up your evening, or at least an hour of it. And as previously mentioned, everybody's really busy, so it's nice to have you here. And yeah, it's definitely not a light topic, but I think it's a really important one, and one that a lot of people, if you spend any amount of time in the mountains, might have to deal with some form of trauma related to that. Or also the mountains can also be a place where you go to heal from trauma as well. I think a lot of us can probably relate to that. So I'm a mountain athlete, sponsored athlete. I've been an Arc'teryx athlete for over 16 years. Love to play in the mountains. I've made my living from it in many ways. And but also, as I say, it's a place where I recreate and find a lot of solace, but it's also caused me a lot of personal grief and trying to come to terms with that new relationship. This is where Mountain Muskox has come in. It's played a really big part of my life, and it's helped me through some really hard times, and getting to work with Sarah is a real privilege. And we recently launched a chapter in Squamish. I was an initial member of the first round, the first cohort in Canmore, where I was previously based, and I've subsequently also become a board member for Mountain Muskox. So yeah, look forward to sharing this evening with you guys.
Adam is deeply integrated. Yeah, so before we go further, I'd love to do a land acknowledgement. So as Adam mentioned, myself and him are both located in Squamish. So we are on the ancestral and unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples. So specifically the Squamish Nation, the Tsleil-Waututh, and the Musqueam First Nations. And something that I'm continually reflecting on as someone who spends a lot of time outdoors and interacts with the land to assist in other people's healing is how, through my relationship and folks who are outside our relationship to the land, that also creates an inherent connection to the people who've been tending this land for time immemorial, and how we can act in new ways, in decolonial ways, to support their well-being. And just on the topic, I mean, we're talking about trauma, and that's something that a lot of First Nations people are navigating, and so something to hold dear to your heart as we continue to move through this presentation. So Mountain Muskox Mentorship is a program with the intent to be a community to support and care for those who've experienced loss or trauma in the mountains. So specifically, our mission is to provide safe, supportive, professional, and peer-supported group circles for anyone who's been impacted by trauma in the mountains. And typically, the folks that we're working with, we're seeing a lot of folks who are mountain recreationalists, mountain professionals. We have folks who are from SAR, we have folks that work on ski patrol, and also loved ones and close people to folks who hold those roles. So it doesn't need to be that folks are directly related to the mountains themselves, but maybe have lost someone who frequents the mountains or have been impacted by the trauma of that. And Adam's going to share a little bit about how the Bow Valley chapter got started and the intention behind Mountain Muskox.
Yeah, so Canmore, like a lot of mountain towns, it's a small knit community, and a lot of people who live in those places do recreate in the mountains, or as Sarah was saying, have some affiliation with it. And what happened in Canmore in 2020, obviously COVID happened, and so there was this real sense of separation that happened. And prior to that, there'd been a few fairly significant mountain accidents in the community that had really rippled deeply into the core of the community. The avalanche that I was involved in was one. Sarah Hunican and Barry Blanchard, who were two very well-respected alpine guides in that community, had suffered their own trauma and started talking about the need to connect around these issues. And up until quite recently, there's been a lot of stoicism in the mountain community, especially in the mountain professional community, where basically it was, you went through something really bad, get back on the horse and get back out there and sort of bury it and don't deal with it. And we're seeing a lot of guides or heavy recreationalists with long-term psychological issues, whether that was depression, issues with their family, difficulty integrating, or just like a loss of love for the places they were recreating. And so they decided, along with a mutual therapist that they were working with, to start Mountain Muskox. And so the idea there was, they weren't entirely sure whether there's going to be group therapy at first, or and that's sort of what the initial intention was. But over time, we realized it was best to just create a community, a peer support community. And so what that means is people who have various levels or experiences with it can share their experiences of what they've gone through with the help of facilitators who can give some specific tools about how to integrate back into community, how to maybe find passion and love again, or just move on with your life and just basically normalize the feelings that you're going through, because a lot of these feelings are kind of standard across most people who experience some form of trauma. And then the other hope for this is that it's something that will cascade back out into the community, to also be able to do evenings like this, to teach the broader community about how to support people who are going through trauma or some form of grief. So that's sort of the general role of it.
Thanks, Adam. Oh, there we go. Okay. So let's talk about what is mountain trauma. So first, we'll just kind of pare back the trauma element of that. So trauma is something that creates a lasting emotional and physiological response in the body, and often that is going to result from an incident or a series of events. And those events or incident are likely emotionally disturbing or life-threatening. So it really impacts our nervous system and it stays with us. And then we'll bring the mountain context into that. So as Adam mentioned, often when we think about the mountains, we think about, leisure and recreation, or maybe our passions. Maybe it's naturalism and going and experiencing the flora and the fauna. Maybe it's about connecting to ourselves and our loved ones in those spaces. Maybe it's a place to push ourselves, or for others, it's actually their career centered around being in the mountains and the vocational purposes of that. And then we have the underbelly of the dynamic environment that is the mountains, in that we can experience traumatic events out there. So that could be anything from getting lost to sustaining an injury. Being in a scenario where we're fearing for our lives can bring up a sense of trauma, or experiencing a death within the group that you're out with, or loved ones. And then something else that's really important to highlight is that we can experience trauma either directly or indirectly. So we could be present, like that trauma could have happened to us. Maybe we sustained a severe injury. Maybe we witnessed someone else sustain a severe injury, or perhaps someone that we're really close to sustains a severe injury, and we weren't even there for it, but just seeing how that impacted their lives, or just hearing about it can produce an experience of trauma. So there's these varying levels of separation and closeness to which trauma can occur from. So let's actually talk about what those impacts of mountain trauma can be. For folks who are highly woven into the mountains, it can play a large impact on their sense of identity. So if they've centered a lot of the way they spend their time, maybe where they live, just their sense of self, if it's deeply tied to the mountains, then going through a traumatic event can be really disorienting to who we are and how we want to reorient as an individual after that event. And the next part of that is our community. So again, if we've centered the mountains as a place where we're connecting with others and connecting to ourselves, it's likely that everyone around us is going to still engage with the mountains and how challenging that can be and alienating that can be at a time where we've experienced this really challenging event. And how do we now still interact with our community and gain support and not feel a sense of social isolation when we're maybe in this reorientation, re-navigation of how we want to be in relationship with the mountains. Another element of that is purposefulness. So we, again, for folks that, and I say we because I'm definitely one of these people and have a vested interest in knowing about this and sharing about this. When we center the mountains, it can bring a lot of drive and purpose to our lives, and for me has played into like how I travel through the world and where I go and what destinations I seek, where I've chosen to live, the career I've chosen. And so when that event can happen, it can again like rupture our sense of purposefulness or what's driving us forward. The next impact of mountain trauma is around our coping mechanisms. So again, for folks who are woven into mountain communities and centering the mountains, often it's a place of reprieve, something that helps us cope with our day-to-day struggles. Maybe it helps you like blow steam off after work, or maybe planning expeditions is something that becomes like a bright point on your horizon that you work towards. And just learning how to unwind in different ways. And so when a traumatic event happens, clearly we need a lot of coping to be able to navigate through that. But likely we've also been stripped away from accessing the mountains as a coping mechanism. So that can really kind of like double down the sense of feeling lost and disoriented. And then the last part is career and vocation. So for folks who are working in the mountain industry, having a traumatic event in the mountains can also strip them from their financial well-being and ability to provide for themselves. So how do we even identify if we're experiencing trauma? We've got kind of two mechanisms. So we have the feelings and the experiences. So we'll talk about the feelings first. So there can be feelings of guilt, shame, and blaming of oneself, especially if you've been in an incident with other folks and you survive and maybe they don't, or maybe you're less injured. Feelings of survivor's guilt can arise there. We can have anxiety and fear show up, and I'll pair that with sadness and depression in the sense that if those experiences are ongoing and pervasive long after the event. Obviously, it's really normal to have fear and sadness arise after any kind of incident. We can also experience numbness and detachment from our lives. That can look like dissociation. So just feeling very disconnected from our day-to-day reality. We can also experience fatigue. So when we go through a traumatic event, it's really dysregulating to our nervous system. And there's a lot of mechanisms that are unfolding where our nervous system is trying to bring us back down to baseline. And perhaps there's also a physical injury that's occurring at the same time. And so our bodies are going to be taking a lot of the energy that we have to try to heal that physical and mental emotional injury that we're experiencing. It's also really normal to have anger and irritability after an event. It can feel really unfair to have experienced a trauma or loss in the mountains. And then the last one is around sensory sensitivity. So sense of sound is very activating to the nervous system. And so typically after people have gone through a trauma, they'll be very sensitive to loud sounds and loud noises. That startle response is a bit turned up. And it's worth noting that if you experience any one of these symptoms, it doesn't mean that you have trauma, and you don't have to experience all of them to also be identifying a potential experience of trauma, but it's more a clustering effect of these symptoms. All right, so then we have our experiences. So it's likely after an event that we could have intense memories or flashbacks show up, headaches or stomach aches. So again, that's tied to the nervous system and the body's inability to regulate after a traumatic event, and that will show up in various organs in the body, not necessarily being able to function because they're not resetting and they're not at ease like they would be if we were able to access regulation more easily. Challenge concentrating, which is another symptom of that, where when we're caught in a fight, flight, or a shutdown response, we actually lose access to the prefrontal cortex to the same degree that we would have access if we were regulated and feeling calm. And then we can have challenges with sleep. So that could look like disturbing dreams. It could be having a hard time falling asleep, maybe getting woken up early, just general experiences of insomnia. And then that can also look like accessing sleep as a reprieve from the challenge of navigating trauma and maybe oversleeping. And the next one is socially isolating. So this one's really worth highlighting. We'll express more around that when we talk about ways to heal from mountain trauma, but it's very common that we'll feel like the experience that we've gone through is too much for our friends and family or the people around us to support us through that. And so over time, there can be a stepping away from social connection. And then a very natural response is to avoid situations that remind you of the event. And then the last one is withdrawing from interest. So that can come along with like a bit of the malaise and apathy that can arise alongside trauma. So Adam is going to share his story with us. Let me stop sharing my screen. There we go. Oh, you're muted, Adam.
First timer over here. Sorry about that. No, so I just want to start by saying that so my story involves the death of my wife, and so it, to some degree it's quite a high level of trauma associated with it, and other people's experience could be any number of incidents could lead to trauma. So I just want to start by saying that there's no comparison. There's no bar to it. So my story in January of 2020, I was going skiing with my wife Laura and a friend of mine Kevin, and Kevin's a ski guide, but we were all going for a recreational ski day, and it was a considerable hazard day in the Canadian Rockies, but it snowed a lot, and it was sort of conditions that we'd been out in before. And by that point, I'd already skied almost 40 plus days that year, and Kevin had been out quite a bit as well. And Laura also had the highest level of avalanche training on the day, or at that time. And she was also a family medicine doctor. And so I'd picked her up from doing rounds in the morning, and we went to go check out a new area below Mount Hector. And we'd sort of picked appropriate terrain for the day, or what we thought was appropriate. We were going to be skiing, at tree line or below tree line, avoiding anything with overhead hazard. And we started to ski one feature, and we didn't really like what we saw, so we switched aspects and went over to this ridge, and we skied a really, really fun run. And we already had a skin track in, and so we started working our way across the ridge, working down these chutes. And Kevin had to get back to go pick his kid up from school, and it was starting to get quite cold on the day, and we'd already had we'd already skied a decent amount of powder that day. And looked over at Laura, gave her first tracks down this really beautiful chute, and she skied the line. And we'd identified a safe spot to regroup at the bottom of the slope, and identified a potential creek hazard at the bottom. And so Laura skied the run, went into what we identified as a safe zone. Kevin went to go ski next, and I moved forward to watch Kevin ski, because Kevin was just absolutely incredible, beautiful skier. So I watched Kevin ski the line, and as I stepped forward, I must have stepped on a little convexity or a pocket or something. I don't really know what happened, but the entire slope ripped below me. It was about an 80-meter crown that ran 300 plus meters down, and I started to get caught in the avalanche, and I self-arrested on my ski poles, and I watched this incredible powder cloud start to develop, and I start yelling avalanche, but both Kevin and Laura were over 300 meters below me. And so I saw it settle. There was still quite a lot of debris. I quickly gathered myself and I skied across over to another rib so I wouldn't trigger any secondary slide on top of Kevin and Laura. And I skied down, and when I got down, I could see Kevin off in the trees, and he said that he saw Laura skirting into the trees, and so we both just start yelling her name, and we don't hear anything, and so we instantly knew that something wasn't right. And Kevin was a bit below me, and so he pulled out his beacon, started doing a beacon search, and I pulled out my shovel and probe, and Kevin just started getting drawn in towards the creek, and the readings he was getting were like 16 meters, 12 meters, 8 meters. And then the lowest reading that we got was 4.1 meters. So we knew Laura was buried 4 meters below the snow. And that you instantly know that that's a really, really bad burial. So I deployed the inReach that I had with me. There's no cell signal where we were. And we started digging, and it took us 45 minutes to be able to get to Laura. And when we got to her, I'll never forget. I mean, I saw, sorry. I remember seeing her hand with her glove off, and it was her ring finger. And her face was blue. But she was still trapped in snow the way she was. And so we cleared snow away from her airway. There's no response, and it took us another 40 plus minutes to fully dig her out. And when we did, there was quite a big to dig that far down. You have to start digging about 10 meters back to actually develop to get a proper trench into it. And I remember at one point while digging, feeling tired and just like getting so angry at myself for feeling tired. And eventually was able to pull Laura out. We performed 3 rounds of CPR and started texting with the search and rescue, saying it was pretty critical. And they long lined in, and both Kevin and I knew the search and rescuers, and they recognized Laura right away. And you could just see the look on their face. I'll never forget the look on their face either, because it was just like heartbreak and sadness. And I tried really hard through that whole time to keep it together. And and Kevin lied to me as when he was performing CPR and said that he could feel a pulse, and just to keep me sort of with it. And the second we got long lined out of there, I just collapsed. I just started screaming and crying. And when we got out, we got taken to the RCMP took us to victim services, and Laura by this point had been taken away in an ambulance. It had been air evac'd out. And when we got there, though, we got word that they were still working on her, which meant she had not been declared dead. And so we got in a car and drove the 2 hours to Calgary. I got a friend to drive us, and I had to call Laura's brother to tell her that there was an accident, and didn't know she was alive, which is one of the worst phone calls I ever had to make. And when we got to the hospital, the doctors told us that they were able to get a faint pulse, but they didn't know where she was, but she was in a really bad state. And so, at that point, I had a little bit of hope. And you hear stories of people surviving these, deep burials or from getting hypothermic. And but several hours later, the doctor, the poor resident on staff who, some of the staff at that hospital also knew Laura because she'd done a residency there. Came in, and I'll never forget the words. They said that her injury was incompatible with life. And they couldn't do anything to save her. And so by this point, word had kind of gotten out that this has happened, and luckily this is right before COVID happened, and so the hospital wasn't fully overrun, and they've let at this point a bunch of friends and family started to come down, and we all got to sit around Laura and sit with her, and her mom, her full backstory, her mom was actually in Colombia, and I'd called the hospital, the hotel where she was in Colombia, and got them to wake her up at 1 o'clock in the morning, and we had booked a flight for her to come, and Laura's heartbeat was starting to fade, and as Laura's mom was starting to land, I called her, and luckily she answered the phone on the flight, and she was able to talk to Laura as she flatlined. She was able to say goodbye at that point, and from there, life has basically not been the same since. Having to learn to live with grief and trauma, and every one of the symptoms that Sarah has expressed. And everything from thoughts of suicide to, a year later, I did actually try to commit suicide, and ended up committing myself into a psychiatric ward. And one thing that does seem to help, though, is sharing a little bit of the story and helping other people sort of go through what I've gone through, and sitting with people and just sort of normalizing it, because I was really fortunate, but I had, people like Sarah and Kevin, who is also a board member of Mountain Muskox, and Barry be there right away. And I was able to get therapy really quickly, which has helped. And then just a really supportive community of people. And but it's a really, really hard journey, and one that will stay with me for life. I actually heard a very interesting thing yesterday, and it was somebody saying how they hate the process of grief and of recovery, and because there's no process to it, it's just a journey, and you're on this journey. The process makes it seems really systematic, and it's just not. There's no right or wrong way to deal with it. There's just the way you deal with it. And so I'm fortunate to have the Mountain Muskox group to lift me up, and then also to hopefully act as a mentor to others. So that's my story. Thank you for coming along on it.
Thank you for sharing, Adam. Okay. Also, ooh. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen again here. Okay, so Adam highlights it really well in terms of the ways to heal. It's a journey. It's a non-linear process. So you can see that at the center of this Venn diagram. Grief and trauma from the DSM. PTSD, the full symptoms are likely to show within 3 months of an accident. However, there can be delayed express symptoms, and then it's shown that PTSD can last or be resolved within 3 months, but 3 months to a year is most common, and it can also, they mentioned that it can go beyond 50 years. So it's very much about how we open to that process and the supports that we are able to receive and access through that process journey. So we'll look at the top of the Venn diagram here. The first thing that we can do when we're trying to access healing after a traumatic event and mountain trauma is reestablishing safety. So our nervous system perceives threat and safety through 3 different ways. So that's between ourselves and our relationship with our environments. So initially after an accident, perhaps that sense of reestablishing safety is like in your own home. How do you reestablish a sense of safety there? And then continually push outwards, maybe returning back to environments that were akin to where your trauma happened. The second is we experience threat and safety within relationship with others. So that could look like learning how to feel safe again around the people that were present for the accident, or just learning how to feel safe with folks supporting you as you go through loss and grief. And then the third is reestablishing safety within oneself. So when we have these experiences occur, it can be really natural to lose a sense of trust in ourselves. And also from this nervous system lens, we can get really dysregulated, meaning that there can be strong sensational feelings and like physiological responses that can be occurring in the body. They're really uncomfortable and can feel really unsafe. So that would be like, you know, like tightening the chest, or like this stomach that's always turning, or maybe feeling like totally dissociated and flatlined in our system. So how do we actually reestablish the sense of safety? And then the next piece, and I mean, there is no particular order, but this is 3 pieces to a puzzle, and hopefully they're all occurring simultaneously. But another element is accessing individual therapy. So I'm biased. I'm a therapist. I believe that everyone should have access to therapy. Obviously, cost can be prohibitive, but there are a lot of income-based sliding scale clinics available. But to have someone overseeing you and holding this macro picture within your process, and then supporting you at each leg of the journey as things shift for you is really important. And then the third component is community and co-regulation. So this is where Mountain Muskox enters in, and I'll explain more about that in a moment. But as a species, we're a social species. So the way that we have evolved to be safe is to be in groups. And so our nervous systems actually talk to the nervous systems of the people around us. And so one of the most regulating things that we can do when we're dysregulated is to be around someone else who is regulated. And that helps our nervous system calm down. It helps us perceive that actually we are in a safe setting, even if maybe we don't feel like that. And then to be surrounded by a community of people who are there to support us is really important. So how is Mountain Muskox offering support? So as Adam mentioned at the beginning, we have circles located in the Bow Valley, so specifically Canmore. We have folks that attend that circle from as far away as Red Deer. And then we also have a circle that started in September in the Sea to Sky, and it's specifically located in Squamish, but we have folks from Vancouver and Whistler, and we're accessing that whole corridor. So anybody that wants to come, and we meet monthly for 3 hours, and myself and another facilitator offer a container, but we offer tools, we offer some psychoeducation, and then we open space for members to connect with one another, and to have that sense of support and being seen and understood by folks who've had similar experiences. Because as we talked about before, one of those impacts can be the sense of losing access to your community or people that understand. We also have healing immersions once a year. So that is a weekend of different muskox activities and processes, and that occurs once a year in Canmore. And then something that we're continuing to build out in the Sea to Sky area specifically, as we're newer, is we're compiling all the other resources and supports and therapists who are well aligned with our organization, and can support folks that are needing more than just a monthly circle or just a healing immersion. And then, as Adam mentioned, the long-term vision of Muskox is to continue to expand. So ideally, this will be available in many mountain communities, and that as this program and organization becomes more established, that peer mentors will actually be able to offer the teachings that are presently shared by facilitators. And there's also some plans in the works to get an online circle so that we can be accessing folks regardless of location. So
one thing, I think I should just explain why the Muskox.
yeah.
So the Muskox circle around the weak and young in their group, and so that's how they offer support, is they circle around it. So that's where the idea of the Muskox came from. Sorry, I should have mentioned that in my initial brief.
It's okay,
yeah.
I forgot to. Okay, so let's talk about, like, Sandra asked me to put together some takeaways for how to respond to mountain trauma, and it was a baffling question for me. It's not a simple, like, 1-2 step kind of thing to navigate, but there are ways that we can prepare ourselves and show up in response to these experiences, and also to support others who are responding to these experiences. So this is what I've got. So before the incident, this goes back to the 3 T's. So really making sure that you have adequate training for whatever terrain that you're going into, and slowly gaining experience in those spaces. And then having that really solid emergency plan, trip plan, and knowing what all of your egress points are. The reason why this is so important is that as soon as an incident is starting to unfold, we're shifted out of a regulated state. And so to have all of these things predetermined and easily able to lean into, because they've been set up when we had our access to our prefrontal cortex. You know, maybe we were on the couch at home and we looked at all the weather and we knew what all of our egress points were, and we shared our trip plan and our emergency plan with our friends. It allows that to be in place so that we can lean into it in this space where we're feeling pretty scrambled and chaotic and stressed. So that's the before. And then ongoing, so this is before, now, later, all the time. As a human, it's really important to develop and maintain a strong circle of support around you. I think the pandemic really highlighted that to everyone, and it is one of the most important things that we can do as a human. And so there's different layers of that. So that's within personal relationships with friends and family. Professionally, if you have folks who can support you, as I said before, I'm biased to having a therapist, but if you have access to someone in that way, it means that relationship is already standing and you have someone who understands you before something like this happens. And then if you're navigating the trauma, then that relationship's already in place. And then within community, so these larger circles of support, like Muskox. And then after, so how we can respond after we've experienced mountain trauma. I'll just bring your brain back to the prior slides of ways to heal. So accessing your circles of support. And then if someone that you know has experienced trauma, mountain trauma, then one of the best things that you can do is to stay in a relationship with them. So something that's really common is that someone's experience will unfold and the community will be really tuned into it. But then as time passes, the effect and the impact on people who were maybe not as close to someone who was lost in the mountains, that will fade. But for the people who were very close, that loss isn't fading. And so to continue to stay in that supportive relationship is very important. And then basically doing anything that you can to lessen the load for the person who is grieving or is directly themselves impacted by the trauma. That could look like cooking meals, or if they need to access supports, like helping them book appointments. Just the day-to-day small tasks can be really challenging. And so offering your support in this way of like, how can I help you get through day to day, and just have that person know that you're there for them. Okay, so how you can engage with us. The ongoing joke about Mountain Muskox is it's a circle that you don't want to be a part of. But should you need to access us, we're here. So you can learn more about our organization and what we offer at our website, which is up top there. You can follow us for updates on what's going on Instagram. And then if you or someone you know, if this feels relevant, like something that you want to access and locationally it's feasible for you, you can, or if you have any questions, you can also email mountainmuskox@gmail.com, and that will directly connect you to our executive director, who will then also support with intake and bringing you into a circle. So that is our presentation. I'm going to stop sharing. Oh, I'll show the last slide. Thank you again, AdventureSmart.
Well, thank you, and thank Adam as well. There's a bunch of questions that folks have, and let's crack right into them. I think one of the first ones that came up was, if a person that you know has had a major incident and has suffered trauma, how do you talk with them? I know that's way general question, but let's sort of crack that open. Like sometimes it's hard to know whether or not you want to, like, you should be even approaching the topic, or should you be avoiding the topic? Like, how does this work?
I mean, I'll give an answer, and then I think Adam probably has a very informed answer, but I would actually just ask them that, like, hey, I know this has happened. Do you want to talk about it? And if you do, I'm here. And if you don't, then that's fine. And like, how would you like to connect? Also checking in on one's own capacity. It's really important, I think, when trauma unfolds. We can have a curiosity that might bring us towards it, but being clear about your own capacity to navigate that with someone. Maybe you're having a really hard period of time in your life and you don't have capacity to dig deep into those topics, and maybe you do. And so just navigating from that space. But Adam, do you want to share?
Yeah, so this is one of my things that I always found really interesting, is when people come up to me and would ask me, hey, how are you doing? And I actually hated that question, because it put all the onus on me to have to answer. Because like the answer is like, I'm doing shitty. Like, it's just the reality. It's like, I've went through something horrible. Of course I'm not doing okay. So what I appreciated more was when people come up to me and they would just sit with me or be like, hey, I'm here for you, anything you need. And eventually, if I wanted to talk about it, I would. And once again, there's also like a level of, if we are a close friend or a family member, I'm more likely to talk about it. My situation was quite public, and so I would have kind of strangers come up to me and ask me the same thing. I was like, we don't have that level of a relationship at this point. So I won't answer that question for you. So anyway, for me, it's more just sit with a person, just have a normal conversation, acknowledge that they've gone through something hard, and then let them come forward with it. And if they want to laugh at that moment, they may just need you to laugh. If they want to cry, they'll cry. If they need to scream, they'll scream. If they want to go for a walk, go for sleep, anything, just be there and support them that way. The food one was a great example, Sarah. So yeah.
In SAR, we have something called critical incident stress management. It's a program that we have for after a task that SAR folk groups go into. Often, unfortunately, there are outcomes that aren't exactly what we want them to be. We have a lot of great outcomes, but you can't get through a year as a group without having a bad outcome usually. And so they've built this sort of peer-based model Is Mountain Muskox involved with the SAR community at all, or do you use a similar model that has been used for critical incident stress management?
I know one of our facilitators is actually training in the critical incident stress management model, and likely will bring some of that forward. We do have folks who are part of SAR in our circles, and that's a group of people that we've like advertised a lot to, because it's directly in alignment and yeah, has great impact.
There are a lot of people in the chat, a lot of people in the Q&A who have reached out and said, it is wonderful what you guys are doing. One person was saying that they wanted to thank you for setting up the chapter specifically in Squamish because they found out that their partner who had witnessed an accident when they found the group, and it's been very helpful and navigating all that comes through the trauma. And another person who pointed out that these kinds of groups need to happen more often. So right now we have one in Squamish and we have one in Canmore. Is it expanding, or are there other groups like that in other parts of the province?
The main expansion that we're working on next is to get an online group together. So that will be accessible to people regardless of geographical location, which is really nice. And something else that we've noticed for folks who are, deeply immersed in mountain communities, there's a lot of nomadicism. And so if you aren't in one place, but you want to be able to connect consistently, regardless of location, and that would be really supportive. And there is another, I think it's based out of the States. Let me just find it.
In Bozeman.
Yeah, what is it called?
But if anybody is in a community and they would like to start a chapter themselves, I mean, one way, we are very, very open to that, of course. And one way, as we all know, of actually getting something going is having somebody with energy and intention behind it. Because it does take quite a lot of work to open a chapter and to keep it going. But if there is a community and we have somebody who's very interested, please reach out and we'd be more than welcome to happy to accommodate. And I do think that it should be as easy to access as possible for people. And often, driving from Pemberton to come to Squamish, or even from Kitsilano to come out to Squamish for an evening, is a big imposition. If we can limit that imposition and make it easier for people to show up, then by all means. If Vancouver had 5 chapters, that'd be awesome.
And you answered the question that person had about going online, and that sounds great, because I do agree. Even for myself, where the trauma happens can be very far from where you live often, and also where you need support may not be where you live or where the trauma happened. So an online option could very well be helpful there.
I mean, in my case, I left the community I was in because I couldn't be there anymore. And so I started my own chapter in Squamish. Like, I was living in Canmore and it was too heavy for me to be there for a number of reasons. And so I moved to Squamish, where I already had a community. But when I got there, I was like, I really want to start a chapter. And luckily we had Sarah and a number of other very, very willing people to get it going. So
at this point in time, I think, Sandra, we should probably thank our guests and maybe move on. And I think we have a few things to give away tonight as well.
We do. Thank you, Adam, for sharing, for being vulnerable and transparent. I know it touched me. Sarah, thank you for the insights and taking my challenge to heart and coming up with a wonderful toolbox at the end. I'm very honored, I think, that you felt challenged and then met it very well. I appreciate that. And our audience has been very supportive tonight, and I can see that again here with the reactions. And if we could all be in a room and have a collective Muskox hug, I would want that right now. And so that's what I envision these thumbs up and hearts to be. I listened very intently. I have 1,001 questions I wanted to put forward. We only have a couple gifts to give away. I hope you were listening as closely as I was, and I'm sure you were. So my question: to win a Bright Source light that will be shipped to you directly. Here's the question, and it has to do with something I thought Adam spoke to really clearly, and Sarah too. Actually, Sarah brought up some great slides about feelings and experiences. So the first question is, as quickly as you can type this answer in, Scott's gone off screen, I see, to really concentrate on who answers first. Please describe one feeling you may feel from trauma and describe one experience you may experience from trauma. Sarah had created wonderful slides, and there was a list, and she really defined them and explained them in such gracious detail. It was really a section of the presentation that stuck out for me, hence me asking some questions about it. Thank you, Sarah. So I can see everything coming in here, and it's ringing true. Sarah, I'm sure, can give A+ or Bs, or I think everyone's doing very well. But Scott has to decide and pick that winner, and he announced that, and then he connects us together, and I put you in touch with Bright Source. So
we're going
Scott,
to give the first one answer to Elsie, who said one of the feelings that you can feel is obviously guilt. That would be very obvious as a survivor, and something that a lot of people have suffered in the past. And one of the experiences that you can have is essentially a fear of the mountains, and trying to like stay away from things, and the actual physical fear that you have. So I think we'll pick Elsie for that. I will make sure to send Elsie information via the email that she registered to.
thanks, Scott, and then I'll hook you up, Elsie. Congratulations. The second question is, and the last offer is from Reco. It's a reflector. It's a detachable device that goes on your person, on your item of clothing. It's in clothing when you purchase them. If you want to learn more about that, go back and check out the November 22nd webinar. The question is, though, to win that item. Adam spoke of this, and I felt it was very touching in many ways. He described, a lot of people describe going through trauma process, which he described also as sort of clinical. I think that's how he referenced it in a roundabout way. But what did Adam prefer to describe it as?
And Carolyn was first to jump in there, describing it as Adam said, as a journey.
As a journey. And this last hour, it's been heartwarming. It's been tearful. It's been honest. It's been open. It's been very giving. And that's what I'm taking away from this evening. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. And Scott and I having the opportunity to put these on for you and welcome our guests again, Adam and Sarah. The next time I'm driving through Squamish, I would love to say hello and have a coffee. That would be lovely, or ski. And thanks to everyone who joined us this evening, all the participants. It was a full house tonight. I thank you for that. Thank you for spending the time. We do upload this up. You can watch it on demand or revisit some of the great things that were shared this evening, and gain some more insights. We'll upload this and share it on our socials. On behalf of the BC Search and Rescue Association, our team, my co-workers, the volunteers, the 3,400 volunteers, Scott being one of them, and all of the 78 BC Search and Rescue groups, we all thank you for all the efforts you take to get informed before you go outdoors, because that means you're being very considerate of the likes of Scott and everyone else out there who helps those in need. And don't forget, if you need help, it's available 24/7. The number's 911, and there's no charge for search and rescue. Keep in touch, and we hope to see you at our future webinars. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful, safe winter.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Adam.
Bye-bye. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.